Welcome to Turn the Page podcast with Alyssa and Leah, a podcast where we share our love of children's literature and help you create page turners.
On today's episode, we will talk with Katy. Katy is our fantastic coworker and Leah's first grade teammate. She is a mom of one little boy who is 2, and she is an avid reader who is also in our book club. Hi, Katy.
Hi, guys. Super excited to be here.
All right, Katy. So one thing that I want to say as we start off is you were a part of how we started this podcast. So the day that I decided to go tell Alyssa, so I had a text conversation with my cousin Abby where she was asking me about books for her little boy. And I was like, breaking it, like texting it is different from saying it out loud. And so it really made me think like, this might be a good question that we have to try to answer. And so I was walking down the hall to Alyssa when she was teaching in the cafeteria, and you were in the lobby with a parent, and you were like, I assume that you were answering this question of what should my child read? And you were trying to list books, and I think you even said, I will look at some books in the classroom and get back to you, which I say all the time too, like, let me talk to the kid and look at books and I'll get back to you. But I mean, you might not remember this.
I don't. I mean, I feel like I've had that conversation with parents before. Yeah, sure.
Right. So you were the teacher that was in the lobby. And so walking the list, I was like, this is just reaffirming what our podcast is going to be about.
You're welcome.
Yes.
And since you're a big fan of books, obviously, and I feel like you're a really great teacher at social emotional learning, and you really are passionate about that, and you impart that on your students, I thought this would be a really good time for you to come to our podcast because we're going to talk about some of your favorite SEL books.
All right. Well, I didn't bring them with me because I didn't know that was part of the assignment, but I do have a list right here. And you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead and tell us about your first book and why, and maybe like what you use it for.
So the first one I'll talk about is called The Most Magnificent Thing. I don't think about this book as an SEL book because we read it to death with the curriculum. But when I was considering SEL books, it really is, it touches on a lot of things. It's about a little girl who wants to make something magnificent for her dog. And she tries to make it and she struggles, and she has to kind of persevere and keep trying and try things differently. And, in our curriculum, we talk about the habits of character that we need to create magnificent things. And one of them is perseverance and collaboration and initiative. And those are the 3 that are in that book that it kind of like really hits hard on. And that book really does, by the end of it, my kids will be like, oh, she's using initiative or she's using collaboration. Like it really does teach those concepts really well. So that's the first one. I know you've read it with your class before.
Have, yeah. I love this book, and I love it for growth mindset too. And I used to read this every year at the beginning of school, and then we would make a magnificent thing for the classroom. Do y'all still do that?
Yes.
Yeah. I love that project. I love it. So what we do is, like, after reading it, we brainstorm what could we use in our classroom? What should we make? I think when we did it, it was water bottle holders. And so we made water bottle holders for their chairs.
Yeah. We come up with we have each group create something different whenever we do it. Yeah. So they don't all make the same thing.
Yeah. But I love that. I can remember seeing your class do that, Leah. And I think that's awesome because I think in first grade, that is a hard concept to learn, to like persevere through something.
Right.
And I think though you probably think you're reading the book to death, I think sometimes that's what it takes for the kids to get the message that we're trying to portray. Because the other day I went to go read The Dot, and one of my kids was like, oh, I read this book before. And I'm like, oh, okay. So what is the message of The Dot? And they were like, I don't remember it. And so even though they remembered reading it, they don't remember, but I don't think your kids will forget something you spent that long on.
Yeah. And then when we do go to create the magnificent things, which it's challenging for them, and they really will, like, seeing the little girl struggle. And like, there's one point that she gets really mad and she gives up and she quits, and then she, takes a walk, works with her assistant, who's her dog, and starts over and tries again.
Yeah.
And at the end, she's like, it really is magnificent. It's not perfect. It leans a little to the left. It's not the perfect color, but it really is a magnificent thing. And so the fact that at the end, it's not a perfect thing, but it's magnificent because she worked really hard on it. So
yeah, I love that. I think that's a perfect book.
Mm-hmm. So that's the first one. One of my very favorite books to read to kids ever is called Giraffes Can't Dance. And I know y'all know this one also. It has like some of the lines in it that just give me goosebumps and like make me tear up almost every time I do. Like at the end where it says, everyone can dance. We just need a different song. So, it's about a giraffe and he's at the jungle dance and all these animals can, are dancing around doing their special animal dance, whatever it may be. And he's clumsy and he's like got knobbly knees and he's, too tall. And so he like leaves with his head down, feeling dejected because everybody's laughing at him, and then goes and talks to a cricket. And the cricket's like, everything makes music if you want it to, and everybody can dance. They just need a different, they just need their own song. So he, finds his song in the moon and then learns that he can dance, and everybody's like, well, you can dance too. And so it's really beautiful. It's got some really beautiful lines in it. And it's just, I just think it's a really nice message that sometimes dancing looks different for different people, and not just dancing, but whatever it is, however you're expressing yourself, whatever your art is, or whatever your method of expression is, and it's going to be different.
Yeah.
I love that. We talked about this with back to school books because this was one of Leah's picks. And I think this is a book that I don't think is super common, like for parents, but I think it's a good read. If your child has read something in the classroom, it's a great thing to reread that at home because like we just talked about the most magnificent thing, they're going to get new messages each time. And I do think that is an important thing. Number one, like, you don't need to be telling anyone else they can't dance.
Right.
And number two, we all can dance. We just might do it differently or, dance to our own beat. And I think that's a powerful lesson.
Okay. My next one is, it's called We Don't Eat Our Classmates. Have y'all read this?
I've never read this, but I've seen it.
So
it's brand new.
It's about a dinosaur who goes to school, and the dinosaur is the only dinosaur in class. Everybody else is it's a kid.
Okay.
And so the dinosaur goes to school and keeps eating her classmates, and then she like spits them out or whatever. They don't die. It's a children's book, but so she eats them and spits them out, but then none of the kids want to play with her because she's eating them, and so she's feeling really sad about it, but she's like, I don't know, they're just so delicious. And she doesn't, I guess she's not really connecting the dots. And then she goes back to school the next day, and they have a pet fish. And so she puts her finger in the fish bowl and the fish bites her finger.
Okay.
And so then she's like, this is really uncool. And then she understands we don't eat our classmates because it hurts when people bite you.
Okay.
I love that, and I really want to read it.
Yeah.
And I
It's
think
really cute.
Like, as a teacher, I think a lot of kids don't understand how their actions affect other people. I think that's a normal part of being a child. And so I really feel like this one would be so good, like as a teacher and as a mom, because sometimes like kids don't understand why other kids are having trouble relating.
Right. There is like just a disconnect.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially sometimes the kids that need it most, and they're seeking for belonging.
Yes.
And then they're doing something that's causing them not to have that belonging, but they don't understand. So I feel like this would be, I have a lot of kids I could have read this to.
I know. This is the first time I'm hearing about this, and I just absolutely love this message. I relate to this a lot because I see this a lot in our classrooms of kids trying to fit in or trying to do something that is off-putting to others.
Yeah.
And it's a great lesson. I love it. I can't wait to read it.
It's really
I'm gonna
awesome.
buy it.
Yeah, I'm gonna buy this one too.
I was also I was gonna say The Dot, but I know y'all already talked about it. But I want to say that any book by Peter Reynolds is a great SEL book.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many. He has so many books that just some of it's just about being like a human or being present or just they're like a lot of like mindfulness kind of stuff.
Right.
For him.
I was given a Peter Reynolds book a few times actually by parents, like sometimes, and I love these gifts, like they'll sign the books and give it to
like the perfect teacher gift.
I know. And so I have a few like that. Yeah, I think we should share some Peter Reynolds.
Yeah, he is one of my favorite authors. That's one of the people I mentioned.
Mine too now.
Yours too now. Yeah,
Leah has a favorite author.
Yeah, Leah has a favorite author. I
love BU too.
Yeah, it's a good one.
It is.
It's a good SEL book.
Yeah.
Okay, the last one I said is Chrysanthemum. Which is another book that I read at the beginning of the year every year, and it's another book that like gives me goosebumps. I could read it 100,000 times, and it like gets me like choked up at the end. So I think y'all have talked about Chrysanthemum before.
We have not.
We have talked about it as friends. Yeah. And I don't think we've ever talked about it on here.
Yeah. So Chrysanthemum is about a little girl she's a mouse because all of his characters, Kevin Hincke's characters are mice. She goes to school for the first time, or she's, born. She loves her name. She loves the way it looks on a birthday cake, and she loves writing it in the sand, and she loves the way it sounds. She loves everything about her name. And then she goes to school, and some kids at school, some mean girls at school start laughing at her because it's so long, and she's named after a flower. So she starts to really kind of have negative feelings about her name.
She wilts.
And then she wilts. Chrysanthemum wilted. That's one of the lines. It's like 2 words, and it's so gorgeous and like poignant. And then, she feels really sad about it. By the end of the book, though, another teacher comes in that everybody just thinks is so dreamy and wonderful. And she also has a long name, and she's also named after a flower. And then it says Chrysanthemum bloomed. And so she, I guess, I don't know, what's the SEL message for that? Just I
think it's kind of the same as just learning how to treat people.
Yeah.
And we should accept everyone no matter what.
Yeah.
And so I think it's just like being you.
Yeah.
To bring it back to wonder, because I love wonder, but the kind words don't cost a lot, but they accomplish a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like that is an example of like your words can tear people down or your words can build people up. So like, seeing her wilt because they didn't hurt her physically, but like emotionally by making fun of her name, that really just caused her to feel so sad. Sorry, that makes me like choked up. I don't know why. And then, also your words can cause people to truly bloom or like your effect on their life. And I feel like that's powerful for kids. Even though I think they relate more to Chrysanthemum, the lesson is in the people around Chrysanthemum too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Katy. Those were awesome. And I love them. And I can't wait to read. Don't eat your
classmates.
Yeah, I'll probably think of like another perfect book as soon as we leave here. But I have been thinking about it for a while. I know there's so many.
Yeah.
So
and just share it with us. So we also have some questions, just that we want to ask our guests, just to get to know you and talk about books more. So we have, what is your favorite children's book of all time?
So one of them I said Chrysanthemum because it is. I mean, Giraffes Can't Dance is another favorite children's book of all time. One of my most recent favorite children's books that I wrote on y'all's on your podcast Facebook about it, but they're by an author named John Klassen, and he wrote this trilogy of hat books, and I don't even know why I like them so much. I just like the illustrations are like kind of tell a different story than the words, and I think that's always really neat in a children's book where you where you have to look at the illustrations and listen to the words to get the whole story, And
what's the title?
So one of them is called This Is Not My Hat, and in that one it's a little fish stole a hat from a big fish. And he's like, this is not my hat. I stole it from a big fish. Okay. So as soon as you that's the first line in the book, and the kids are like, what? And they are like, they're hooked immediately.
I like that.
And so then it just goes through, and really are we doing spoilers for the end of the book here?
Yeah, you can say
so.
Spoiler.
I mean, we're pretty sure that the big fish ate the little fish and got his hat back, by the end of the book. It doesn't say that exactly.
Ooh, I love it.
But it just shows by the end. And the little fish is all smug at first, and he's like, he's not going to know where I'm going. Mm. And then you see the big fish with knowing eyes, darting out to go find him. And he's like, he's not going to find me here. And then you see the big fish going into the.
So you have to look at the pictures.
And then you see the big fish going out of the the seagrass with his little hat.
With his hat now. Again, okay, you got it.
And then
I see what you're saying.
So that's one of them. And then the second one is I want my hat back.
Yeah.
That one, my 2-year-old, I think I literally have it memorized now because he is obsessed with that one right now as well. That one's really fun because it's just this bear. He goes through to all these different animals, and he's like, I can't find my hat. Have you seen my hat? And they're like, I haven't seen your hat. And then, but it's fun for different character voice kind of.
Yeah. We love that.
And then he goes and he asks the rabbit, have you seen my hat? And the rabbit's like, wearing a hat, and the rabbit's like, no, I haven't seen your hat. Why are you asking me? I would not steal a hat. Don't ask me any more questions. Uh-huh. And then the bear goes on, and then he comes to this realization, and the page is all red, and his eyes are wide open, and he's like, I have seen my hat. And then he goes back and finds the rabbit, and pretty sure he eats the rabbit, and so
you think? Well, I think these books. So it looks like his other series. I think they're also meant to teach things. So maybe those are meant to kind of teach, animals eating other animals, like a food chain kind of situation. Because his other ones are shape books. I have read his shape. He has a shapes trilogy, and Carmel has one of these books. I think the square one, and it goes on what squares can do and circles can't do, and.
I don't know if it's very educational as much as, sure it does it. Maybe yeah, you could talk about the food chain if you wanted to bring in.
Maybe not. Maybe
some
not.
Education with it.
I've never read it. I would like to read it though.
Yeah.
But I know I'm dying for y'all to read them. I went through a phase where I read it to all of my adult guests that came to my house, which is really, that's a weird thing to do. But, so the last one though is these two turtles, and there's one hat, and they both want it, and it's nobody gets eaten, everybody just wants to share the hat, and it's really it's a nice wrapping up to the trilogy. It's really it's beautiful and tender.
Good.
So those right now are my favorite children's.
I love it. It's so books. Exciting.
I just requested I want my hat back on Libby.
On Libby, it's.
So on Libby, you can get Kindle books or audiobooks.
Okay.
They don't have the audiobook of that, but I have been using Libby in my car. So if Carmel and I are waiting at gymnastics, we have a few minutes.
And Libby is our online public library.
Most public libraries use this as their app. So you can link your public library card for any public library, not just ours. And you can have 15 books at a time. So
but you don't have the pictures though? It's on a Kindle. It's a Kindle.
So you can send it to your Kindle. I just do it on my phone when we're in the car. Yeah. Obviously, if we're parked just waiting somewhere. But yes, it has the pictures. They're just small.
Okay.
But it's not bad. Cool.
I think I still have all 3 books here. I've thought about bringing them home so that I can read them to Oliver because I'm getting real tired of the other one. So I feel like I need to change it up, and he might be open to a new hat book.
I think he would be.
So
he loves hats.
Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to backtrack a second because we forgot to ask you about your reading journey.
Okay.
And I do want to hear about you as a reader because I know you're an avid reader now and you love to read with your class, but I want to hear about how were you as a kid reading, and then maybe tell a little bit about Oliver, because I know he's kind of a particular type of reader, and I feel it's something that we've talked about already. So
I have always, my first job I ever wanted to be in my life was a librarian, and my sister would be like, you can't be a librarian. You can't even read. And I'd be like, I can just turn the pages.
Oh.
I can remember sitting in kindergarten on the carpet, listening to my librarian read. And it was like painful for me to not be up there holding the book in my hand. Like I wanted to be up there so bad. And then I remember also in kindergarten, we had like a workbook where we like started with the alphabet or whatever it was. And then I could see later in the book, there was stories. Uh-huh. And my teacher would go around after we had done our work and like stamp our books. And one day I like was just so anxious to get to the story. I'd flipped ahead and she stamped the wrong page. And but she was sweet about it, or else I probably wouldn't have pleasant memories.
Yeah. Right,
she was like, you're just so excited to start reading. So I've always loved reading. I always have. Actually, I was in high school and took the ACT. I got a 35 on the reading part of the ACT. And like, I am not a good test taker. Like my composite was not anywhere close to that, but just on the reading, simply because I read so much, I scored really high. And my reading teacher, for years and years afterwards, she would tell that story. Like, I had a student and she, scored I think she told people 36, which was not true. But, she would talk about how, how I just always read a lot, and we would keep a list, and I always had the most books in the class, and I've always loved reading.
And that's what good readers do. I mean, good readers read. Like, if you want your child to be a better reader,
give them a book.
Give them books. Yeah. Like, read to them if they can't read those books. But, like, obviously, the more you read, the better you will be at reading. And I think that's why you start to see such a gap in kids that are readers and kids that are not readers kind of early in elementary, because the kids that can read and are reading and are holding books are just like taking off vocabulary wise. Their levels able to grow so quick. Whereas the kids that are kind of stuck decoding, it's just, unless they have someone that's reading to them all the time, it's so hard. And I mean, that's one reason, obviously, I know all three of us are passionate about like growing readers and helping kids to get past that stage to reading.
And I think too, that's why it's so important to, as parents, if you do have a struggling reader, don't let it always be a struggle. Like I always tell my students' parents that, like, yes, they need to practice reading at home, but not this book. Like they can't read this book. Like just read this to them because it's a great book, you know, and just like make it be a pleasurable thing sometimes too. Because if it's always work, like anything, if it's always work, it's that's what it is. It's work, and it's not going to be fun.
To adults, when they're picking that same book over and over again, it's because they know it and they can read it. And to us, it's like too repetitive, but to them, they can successfully get through the book, and that feels good. So that's okay.
Yeah.
Repetition. Yeah.
That's what I want you to bring up about Oliver.
So Oliver, and let me say too, I stopped reading for several years when I became a teacher, and I just felt like overwhelmed with everything else that teachers do, and I just wasn't making time for it anymore. And that's when I started listening on to audiobooks instead. So now I am like a big reader again, but I'm a listener instead of, a reader. So my 2-year-old, though, he loves for me to read him books, but there's like 3 of them and right at a time, maybe, that he likes. And right now 2 of them are Christmas books. And that's what he wants. It's like he wants this book, and then we'll get to the end and he'll be like, I want to read it again. And then I'll read the same Daniel Tiger Christmas book, and we'll get to the end and he says, I want to read it again. And he could do that 10 times in a row, just reading the same book.
I did that.
One time my husband walked by and he was like, why are you reading it in a country accent? And I was like, I'm just trying to keep it fresh. Like I got to do something different. I cannot read this book again. I have to change it.
So my mom shared this the other day. She said, I remember reading the same books, and she said, sometimes I would make up my own part and you would say, that's not how it goes.
Oh, yeah. Because you read it so many times. Yeah. Right. I mean, I think that's great. And I think like honoring that is good as a parent. Sometimes it can be hard to honor that because you're like, oh my gosh, you don't want to read a new book. You don't want to read a different book. Especially my girls tend to like a lengthy book or a book that I don't like love to read necessarily.
Right.
But I feel like there's a reason that they want to read that book. And there's nothing wrong with reading the same book over and over. Yeah. As an adult, there are some books that are very comforting to me that I read. So
I was talking about this too with my mom and my sister, and I said, I think my aunt would actually throw away the books after a certain amount because I would ask her to read them to me so many times, and she would be like, I mean, lovingly and jokingly, like, not this one again. And then sometimes they weren't there anymore. So I think she would get rid
Now,
of them.
I have hid them. I mean, I hide his books sometimes, but then he'll ask for it by name, and I'm like, okay, baby. Like, you know, I have to go get it. Like, you know.
A 2-year-old asking for any book by name is fantastic. Like, you're doing the right thing if your child knows books by name. And if they don't, that's okay, too. I mean, Olivia doesn't necessarily have a favorite book. She'll read any book.
So, Katy, do you have a favorite author?
I have a hard time with this question. I wrote down 2 names, and the first one is John Green. So John Green is mostly a young adult author, but every one of his books is so powerful. And I mean, I think that sometimes you love a book because it's a beautiful story, and sometimes you love a book because it's poetically and beautifully written. And sometimes there's like that magical book that has both, and every one of his books has both. Like, I mean, every one of like every character he's written, I want to be their friend. And then he recently wrote a book called The Anthropocene Reviewed. I can't remember if we read that in book club, but it's like, I know you would love it because we always love all the same books.
Yeah, I'm writing this down.
And I'm sure that I think that anybody would love it. So it's very different from any of his other ones. It's stories, I guess, before, too. Yes. Yeah, I think I might have even suggested it at book club, but maybe I didn't because I'd already read it.
You definitely told us about it. So he like Turtles All the Way Down is the only book I think I've read, and it is. I will suggest that book to anyone, and it is one of my absolute favorites. And I just feel the same way. I mean, beautiful story,
and they're all like that. I mean, he's just, and he you know, he's brilliant, and it comes through in his writing. So that one, the Anthropocene Reviewed, he will talk about something like Diet Dr. Pepper and just talk about his experience with it, basically. And then at the end, he gives it a number of stars. And and like getting to the end and like waiting for those like 5-star reviews, like which are few, you know, in the book. It's just every chapter. I think I'll just read that book for comfort forever too. And if you listen to the audiobook, it is him on there too. So that's always cool to like listen to the actual author telling their story.
Cool.
I also really love David Sedaris just because he's funny, and it's not really my favorite type. It's funny because both of them, now I'm talking about books that are like kind of memoirs, and that's not my favorite kind of book to read. And all of David Sedaris's are. But I think he's just on my mind because I was going to see him at the end of the month, but it was just, I found out today it's canceled.
Aww.
So my mom bought it for me for my birthday, like to go just watch him read. And literally 2 hours ago, it's canceled. But he's funny and smart. And I like.
Never read anything by him.
Yeah.
No.
I don't think so either.
No.
I'm sure that he reads any of his audiobooks too. Most of his I've actually read because it was like in my pre-audiobook days, but I read more of his stuff. But he's like, you know, he's an easy read and fun.
And a strong voice. I feel like that's always nice when you can read somebody that like you can hear them through their writing.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. You've already touched on this one. So how do you read? But you've said that you were a physical book reader.
Yes. And I was like, hardcore physical book reader and never wanted to do anything else because I, like anybody that has ever seen me hold a book, I smell it. Like I like to like touch it. I like the feel of the pages. I like the smell of books. So I was always like, I'm not going to be an audiobook person. I'm not going to do a Kindle. Just
you crave a story and you don't have time to read. In fact, so now with Libby, I have been like going back and forth between an audiobook and a regular book because I don't have to pay for both of them. And I love that because sometimes I do have a minute to read and I enjoy really reading.
Yeah.
But when I have to buy it, I felt like I had to like make a choice. Like you can either have the audiobook or you could have the real book.
For sure.
And I know you're a physical book person. The first time I went to your house, you actually had a book Christmas tree. That's at your old house.
Yeah. Yeah. So. I do love a book Christmas tree.
And so can you now give us like any book recommendations, like for children or adults?
So I mostly have adult books, and I've been really thinking about this because we're in a book club together.
Yeah.
And most of my favorite books now, I was talking to Leah about it the other day, like if you're a reader, your favorite books change and evolve, and usually it's a book I've read recently. So most of my favorite books y'all have read. So I was trying to go back farther. The one children's book though that I have on my list is My Father's Dragon, which Leah finally read to her students last year, but she's going to try it again this year and keep the list of the items in the bag because that's fun. So that one my dad read to me as a kid, and I read it to my kids. I wait till the end of the year because for my students, if I read it too early in the year, they're just not, I feel like they need a little bit more growth before they can fully grasp it. But they always...
It's a chapter book. It's longer.
Yeah. But it's got pretty short chapters. And, I feel like any book that you read to kids, if you pump them up for it, just like with the hat books, when I'm like, guess what, y'all? I have another hat book. They're like, what?
Yeah.
I mean, if you tell them, if I'm like, this is one of my favorite books of all time, my dad used to read it, and, it gets them excited for it. So my kids always love it.
Even in here, because I knew like I was going to read probably more than one chapter at a time, like I turned the lights off, I got on the carpet with them, and we all sat in a circle, and like I made it kind of cool and, different from our everyday class.
Yeah, right.
I think that's a really good point though, like putting like value on it and making it not like, okay, now we have to go sit down and read.
Oh no, like, it was like a fun time.
Right.
Like we get to read this book. This is one of my favorite books. Or like, like this one of the books someone recommended to me, or my mom used to read as a kid. Like those kind of things are important. And I feel like as a parent, if you're trying to get your kid to buy some stock in reading, that is a way to do it. Like make it.
Or I'll always read the inscription, and if anybody ever gives me a book, I'm always like, you got to write in it, because then if I'm reading it to, even now to my, 2-year-old, I'll be like, this book is from Aunt Anna, or, or whoever it is, and I read that, I do that with my students too.
Yeah. I love a book with a story. That's awesome. Yeah.
I'm just going to say these, but not talk about them long, because I know y'all have read them, but Project Hail Mary, Alyssa and I both love, and I think you still have not read it.
I need to read it.
You do. You need to. Everybody needs to read it. I will suggest the book to everybody ever. The Anthropocene Reviewed I already talked about. I also think everybody should read that. Okay, so one of an early favorite book of mine was The Thornbirds. Have either of y'all read that?
No.
I don't. You want to look up the author of it?
The Thornbirds.
It's been a long time since I've read it. It's like a epic romance, coming of age. Like I don't even want to say too much about it because I feel like it's been too long for me to talk about it without giving potential spoilers.
Okay.
But it's a really great book.
Okay.
And I don't know, it's I just remember it being very gripping. It's like one of those thick, big, thick.
That's very thick.
books.
That's like 2 inches. She's showing.
Yeah, it's a big.
It's 692
yeah,
pages.
it's a big book. It's a big book,
and it's by Colleen
McCullough. Yeah, okay, I can remember when I was reading it, my friends hid it in the washing machine because they were so tired of me like reading, and they wanted me to hang out. And it was really not a funny joke because I was like a pivotal part of the story. Yeah. So, and I remember too, after I read it, being like, I'll never read a book that good again for as long as I live.
That is the worst feeling as a reader.
Yeah.
When you get to the end of either a series or a book and you're just like, I don't want this to end because it's so good.
Yeah. Oh. And you're like dying to know how it ends, but don't want it to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this has come up recently because I've been reading these series with my cousins too. And when we get to the end, they're like, are you finished yet? Are you finished yet? I'm like, no. No, because actually I've stopped reading because I don't want it to end. And they like keep pushing me that you have to finish it. You have to finish it. Like, I will. I just slowed down. Like I tore through 5 books and now I'm on the 6th one and I don't want to finish it.
Yeah. I can't ever do that. I don't have that kind of self-control. So I don't really relate. I relate to wanting to, but not to actually doing it. Yeah. I feel like I'll like speed read sometimes through the end just because I want to find out how it ends. Yeah. And then I'll go back and do it again. Yeah. Slower. Yeah. Okay. One more. And this one's like kind of off the wall. It's called Flatland, A Romance in Many Dimensions. I read it in a math class in my education math class in college. I was the only person in the class that liked the book. Okay. And everybody, like for our final exam, we could choose to write about that or something else. And I was definitely the only one that picked writing about Flatland. Really? But it's about a shape and he lives in one of the dimensions, he lives in Flatland, I think. It's a square, and he lives in Flatland. And then he goes, there's like the 3-dimensional land, and then there's something a picture below that. There are some pictures in it, but it's a novel. It's short. Okay. It's a weird book. Okay. But if you, it has like some like.
It is literally about like dimension.
I mean, it's a math book. Yeah. But they talk about like societal things as well. Like he's he's not accepted in the 3D land because he's a flat shape. And there's stereotypes for the different planes of existence and stuff. So
is it like middle grade? Like what is it?
I don't think so. No? I mean, I feel like it's like I feel like it's an adult book.
It's an adult book. Okay.
Yeah, like I always like to do this, but like the first line of it, I call our world Flatland, not because we call it so, but to make its nature clear to you, my happy readers who are privileged to live in space. Yeah. I always like to read a first line of a book. This says 12 plus on Common Sense Media.
12
plus.
But is that age? Okay.
Yeah. So there's like some scariness and violence.
Oh, don't remember that.
Like 3 out of 5. So like not terrible.
Okay. I don't remember
and
violence.
Use of the C word. It's a minute curse word. It might not be a curse word to some people.
Okay. Huh.
Rhymes with rap.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
I also think that everybody should read the 4 Agreements.
You've talked about this.
Yeah. I guess I just read it at the right time in my life. It's like a self-helpy book, I guess, but just about agreements that you make with yourself and the world. And at the time that I read it, I needed them. So
yeah,
So
I remember you telling me about that.
I remember that's like when I first met you. You told me about that book.
Yeah,
I like barely knew you, and I was like, oh, that's like you have a lot of self-control because I don't have like the power to make some of those agreements, but I do think they're all like powerful agreements.
Yeah.
So this is the end of our episode, but at the end, we always ask a question, and so. We'll start with you, Leah, and we can just kind of go around. Yeah. Leah, what is making you turn the page right now?
So we are reading a book for our podcast to review. Do you want me to say the title?
You can say the title.
Or is it going to be a surprise?
You can say the title.
Okay, so we're reading The Wild Robot right now to review later on in a later episode, and that's what's making me turn the page right now.
Yeah?
I'm listening to it.
Okay.
I'm going to have to say the C word.
Okay.
The C word. I'm reading a book called Oh Crap, Potty Training by Jamie Glowacki. And we are trying to potty train. And that's the book. So that's what's turning the page right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Love that as a parent. Oh, goodness.
Ask me in a couple weeks if I would recommend it. Because right now I'm just like, would like to throw it into the potty. So.
You will get there and he will get there.
Yeah.
So I have 2 reasons. So last night I actually woke up in the middle of the night and I finished Restart. And let me just tell y'all, this book is so good. It's like Wonder, but I feel like it's better for like a middle school boy because it's not as emotional and it's about a physical bully who has amnesia and in an accident, and he forgets how he was. And when he wakes up, he wants to be good, but like he has done things to people in his life and in the story. And he has these really terrible friends. And it's about him like redefining himself, but then also having to come to terms with like a past he doesn't even remember. And it was really a great.
Yeah, I want to read it too. A student actually recommended this to us.
Yeah, a kid recommended it to me, and I was like, "Oh, this kind of sounds like The Husband's Secret." It's nothing like The Husband's Secret except for the amnesia bit.
It's called Restart,
and it's good. I mean, I just think it's a powerful story, and I think it's a great story for especially boys, because I think some boys might be like, they might kind of think it's a little sappy, even though I think they should still read it. But Restart is a little less emotional than that, but like it definitely gets the same point across of like, what kind of person do you want to be in your actions?
From a different point of view. It's from a bully's
it's from the bully's point of view. Yeah. Also, Carmel and I started the Magic Tree House.
Aww,
we are listening to Dinosaurs After Dark right now.
Yeah.
Which part of me was like, do I read this as an audiobook with her? Because it is an early chapter book, and I know we'll be there in a couple years, but I feel like we can read the book when we get there. But the other day, we picked up her sister, and so I paused it for her to tell me about her day. Carmel was like, Mom, I need to know what happened. And I was like, it makes me feel good as a mom, because right now we're struggling with sight words and I don't want to lose the joy for reading. So I think, when you said like, you don't have to make every book hard. Like, I do think that that's important. Like, part of our life is reading together, and I want to grow that with her. And lately I've been like, okay, let's pick up the sight words in this book. And I need to remind myself of that like not every book, the point is to pick out the sight words. The point is to love the story, and the sight words will come.
Yeah.
Thank
you so much, Katy. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, we've had a really good time. You're our first guest.
I know. You've been telling me about it for weeks, so I'm excited for it to happen.
Yes. Thank you for listening to Turn the Page podcast with Alyssa and Leah and Katy. Please take a minute to follow us and leave a review. We would love to hear from you.
And speaking of hearing from you, we would love for you to follow us on social media. You can find us on Instagram at turnthepage_podcast or Turn the Page Podcast on Facebook. And we want to let you know that every Wednesday we do a What You're Reading Wednesday. So if you want to let us know what you're reading on Wednesdays, go to our Facebook and Instagram account.
And we have a TikTok now, too. Leah made us a TikTok. And it's the same as our Instagram, turnthepage_podcast. So we'd love for you to follow along with us on any of those platforms. Bye, y'all.
Oh, y'all cute.